Hi, folks. This is Lee W. Mowen, the host of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast. I've been hosting my podcast on Anchor for some time now, and let me tell you why it's the easiest way to make a podcast. When you host with Anchor, you have creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your computer or phone. Anchor then distributes your podcast for you so others can listen on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and many more platforms. You can even make some money with your podcast with no minimum listenership required. And best of all, it's 100% free. It truly is the one-stop shop for those looking to start a podcast. To start, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. Anchor. It's episode 173 of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast, and our special guest is Trace Fowler of Chatterbox Sports. We're talking about the beginnings of the company, Trace's involvement in Chatterbox Sports, and of course, local sports on this edition of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast. Welcome to the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast with Lee W. Mowen. This is a weekly podcast covering all sports in Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio. From Lima to the Ohio River and northern Kentucky, from eastern Indiana to Madison County and all points in between, this is your source of local Cincinnati and Dayton, Ohio sports. Visit the leewmowen.com/podcasts to find your favorite podcasting platform. Music created with the Splash app. Time for another episode with your host, Lee W. Mowen. Let's begin the fourth year of this podcast on the right foot. Like I mentioned, we got an interview with Trace Fowler in just a little bit. But first, it's time for Mowen's Mailbag. That's right. Some questions turned into the mailbag after episode 172 in the live stream on 12 Ounce Sports. And they're from my good friend and loyal fan of the podcast in Matt Morris. He sends in two on this episode 173. And we'll cover the first one. What are the chances that Dayton will get a pro hockey or pro soccer team the next 5 to 10 years? Well, this is a question that pops up often just because, Dayton has a rich history of minor league sports in the Gem City. Well, the first thing that has to happen is a suitable stadium. Where pro hockey, you'll need to build one, and pro soccer, you probably should build one. Although, the Dayton Dynamo's second year at Roger Glass Stadium, home of the Chaminade Julienne Eagles, I like that setup, but if you're talking you want lots of fans, then you might have to build one. So the big question is, will we see a new arena or new stadium in 5 to 10 years? I like to see one happen, but I don't see it happening in the immediate future. Maybe towards the cusp of 5 years. What would that be? July 2025? Maybe then. I don't know. I'd love to see it happen, but I'm not sure. So I know my answer has always been based on when we get a suitable stadium, that's when the team should come. It's like that quote in Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will ask for Archway cookies and a beer. No, I'm sorry, that's not the right quote. If you build it, they will come, of course. But there you go. So, will we see a pro team in Dayton again? I say yes, but we need the building first. Second question, and this is about my alma mater, Wright State University. If Wright State were to ever get Division I football sanctioning, do you think that the Pioneer Football League would be a good fit for the Raiders? I figure with the non-scholarship aspect of the conference that it would be, but I just wanted to hear your opinion on the subject. Okay, first off, I think that everyone knows that I love me some Wright State Raiders, and I was always fine with the fact there's no football on campus. Yes, there's football now. It's club football, which, there's no sponsorships. Players have to pay for their own gear and everything. It's a club, but it's still a sport that deserves the attention of the Wright State students, faculty, staff, and alums. And it's definitely a team I cover a bunch, although I'm not sure how much we're going to cover this fall, thanks to, the dreaded coronavirus and the quarantine continuing to affect collegiate sports. Just a quick touch up on that. The A-10 has already pushed fall sports to spring 2021. The Horizon League has, right now, said that fall sports won't start until October 1st, but I foresee that being a spring 2021 thing as well. I believe the MAC has a later start date right now. I don't believe they pushed the whole thing. And, I'm not sure on the status of the American Athletic Conference nor the Big East. I haven't seen a lick on that, so I can't tell you about Cincinnati nor Xavier. So, the Ohio Athletic Conference, which is Division III, and Wilmington Quakers are your representative in Southwest Ohio. I was about to say Mount St. Joseph, but no, that's the Heartland. And I believe both of them have said no fall sports, wait till spring 21. So there you go. Wright State to get Division I football. A lot of things need to happen. I like Mulholland Field, and when I went to school at Wright State, it was just a big patch of woods. You need a bigger stadium. You need far more stands. You need adequate locker rooms. You need a football stadium, and I don't really see that happening, especially with, the budget issues happening at Wright State right now, and, Wright State still has to get how many sports they need to maintain D1 status. I think they need a couple again because they're under the line, but they applied for the waiver what was it, Central Michigan? Was that Eastern Michigan? One of the Michigans. So right now, Wright State needs to worry about getting a couple more sports back, and hopefully we see the return of softball, but, I don't have a crystal ball. I can't predict the future. But let's say, yes, that happens. Wright State does get a football stadium that's adequate. Yes, I think the Pioneer Football League would be a nice fit for the Raiders. I mean, you got a conference throw about 20 minutes away at Welcome Stadium, the Dayton Flyers. But would Dayton accept it? I'm not sure. So, I mean, the non-scholarship aspect, yeah, I think that would fit Wright State nicely. But, I don't know if I see football ever happening at Wright State. And like I mentioned, I'm okay with that. Football's a great sport. I follow the Flyers, the Bearcats, the Redhawks. And you know what? I follow the Raiders club team. I wish Xavier would get their club team back. Miami's got a club team. I don't think Cincinnati has a club football team, and I don't think NKU does either. And I follow all the D2 and Division III football squads, as you know, during the season. And like I said, I'd be fine if Wright State didn't have a football team. But if things fell that way where Wright State did get an adequate football stadium and the proper coaching staff, yeah, I think the Pioneer League would be a nice fit. The funny thing about the Pioneer Football League is it spans from, I think Dayton is the northmost team in the PFL, and you have a lot of teams down south. You have Campbell. You used to have Jacksonville. I was thinking about the Dolphins, oh yeah, their team doesn't exist anymore. And then you got San Diego, California. So, prepare for a hefty football traveling tag if you're in the Pioneer Football League, but I don't know whatever league Wright State would be in to accommodate football. I don't see them going to the MAC for that, although a Wright State Miami Conference Series, that'd be nice in all sports. So yeah, if Wright State did get all their eggs in the basket for football, I think Pioneer Football League would be probably the better fit. I mean, the Missouri, I'm trying to think if Youngstown State football is scholarship, and I think it is. If Wright State went the scholarship way, I think the Missouri Valley Football Conference would be nice. And there were always talks about Wright State moving on from the Horizon League, but, nothing has come up to that. And I think those rumors will probably die down because, again, Wright State needs a couple more teams to stay afloat in Division I. Which is a sad situation, but I don't see it being a big problem. I think Wright State will stay Division I, and they'll get things back on track. This whole quarantine of the coronavirus has thrown the whole country for a loop. No questions about that, but yeah, those things have to happen, and then maybe you can talk football. I don't see it happening, not right away, maybe 20 years onwards, maybe that'll be a thing, but don't expect it anytime soon. So thank you, Matt Morris. Appreciate those questions for Mallin's mailbag. If you have any questions of your own that you'd like answered on this podcast, the easiest way is Twitter at SundayPod or the Lee W. Mallon, on Facebook, on Instagram. By the way, follow the new Instagram account for this podcast. It's Sunday Pod, and that's where all the new shiny episode arts go. I'm quite proud of the first one I did for the Retro Bowl interview, the 3-year celebration one, and it was about a 5-minute job. It probably looks like it was a 5-minute job, but there you go. Go follow the new Instagram accounts. And now, on the phone, we have Trace Fowler of Chatterbox Sports. Trace, good morning. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm all right. Trying to survive this quarantine, as I'm sure everyone is. Hope you're doing all right during this dry spell of sports.
Yeah, it's pretty rough there for a while. I think the first month of quarantine, it kind of was so fresh that it didn't really hit you. And then I think once maybe 25, 30 days wore off, it was tough, I mean, I tried to keep perspective and realize that I didn't have it as difficult as others, obviously. But, when you take something away that you love, genuinely love, and not only do you do it for a living, but then you take it away just to be able to watch it as a hobby. Depression's a strong word. I won't say that I got there, but I certainly was mentally, it got to me a little bit. But I'm starting to feel good again now that baseball's back. That helps, and I'm hopeful that the fall season will happen. We'll see, but yeah, quarantine was tough.
Yeah, it is nice to see the Reds back and FC Cincinnati back. It's nice that we're finally starting to get sports back, and hopefully that means we can get back to work. So,
Yeah.
So let's begin. Trace, where are you from?
I'm actually from Hamilton, right down near Cincinnati. And essentially was born and raised there, graduated from Hamilton High and went off to school, and then actually lived away from Hamilton, I guess you will, for about 10 years. And then, had a few kids and came back and been here for about 4 or 5 years since. So don't know if I'll, be here for the rest of my life. It's hard to say, but Hamilton's, been home for me for quite some time.
It's your childhood home, and you're back in the big city in Butler County.
That's right.
So how did you first get into sports?
I pretty much grew up with sports my whole life. I started playing when I was young, and I wouldn't say I was good, but I certainly was one thing that I excelled at, and I feel like I had some success. So I pretty much played that all the way up into high school. And then once I finished high school, I was fortunate enough to play collegiately. And then once I got done playing college, I actually coached for a year. And Yeah. So my whole life literally has been around sports, and I'm there for a short amount of time, for about 2 to 3, 4 years, I guess, in the workforce. As soon as I got out of school, I went and got a kind of a corporate job. Sports was gone, at least participating in it. And that was a big void for me. Felt like it just wasn't, it wasn't my cup of tea. So of course I found a backdoor way of trying to figure out how I could get back into it. And lo and behold, here I am. I'm right back into sports. So I'm thankful for that.
Where did you play collegiately, and what sport?
I played baseball. People always ask me if they think I'm a baseball guy. I am. I guess I'd say I'm a baseball guy, but my first love was basketball. And I've always loved basketball. So I say that just because I typically tell people I played collegiate baseball, and they'll just assume that, that's my biggest love. But I've actually played at Sinclair. This is a kind of a quick funny story. I played at Sinclair, had some success there, and then I ended up deciding to play at Urbana. And oddly enough, during the quarantine, it took both of those programs down. So I joke that, my kids won't even believe that I played in college anymore, because I don't know if they'll even exist by the time they get old enough to know what's going on. So, so somewhat sad on that front, but yeah, that's where I went. That's how I got into sports. That's where I played collegiately.
And both suffered a bit. Sinclair's not going to have sports until next school year, 2021-22, and Urbana shut their doors forever. I mean, that had to be a big loss for you, knowing that your alma mater wasn't going to be around anymore.
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, I don't want to make it sound too terribly sad. I honestly, it's not a big deal. I have the memories that I have, and I have the friendships that I gained from those. So, not selfishly speaking, I got out of it what I wanted to get out of it, or I guess you'd say. But as far as Sinclair goes, that's kind of more of the bigger disappointment, just simply because, that was a great program. I was at the ground level of that program and actually coached there while Coach Ditterman was building that up to some success. And for those that don't know, just up there in Dayton and Sinclair, Coach Ditterman pretty much built from the ground up a nationally ranked elite program at the collegiate junior college level, which is very good baseball. So I don't know. You said they'll come back next year. I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, and this is definitely no insider knowledge on my end. I just don't think that I don't think they'll bring sports back at Sinclair for quite some time. I think that it was a decision strategically from a financial standpoint, personally, and I think that they had an excuse with the coronavirus, and I know that's certainly not making it look good on Sinclair's part, but that's kind of how I feel about it. So we'll see. I hope you're right. That's all I'll say. I hope they do bring sports back next year, but we will see, as they say.
Not to sound arrogant, but I hope I'm right on that count too, just because there was a rumor that Sinclair was looking at a lot of land to build a baseball stadium and possibly softball right by the campus, so no more trips from Dayton to Xenia. But
you are right. Yes, I think that kind of got nixed as well when all this started to happen. And I don't want to make this too big of a Debbie Downer of a podcast here, but I don't have high hopes for that. If it happens, great. I will be super excited. But if it doesn't, then it's kind of one of those things where, I kind of seen that coming. So
here's hoping, though. Here's hoping. You mentioned, Trace, that sports has been part of your life, since the beginning. When did you decide you wanted to start covering sports?
Well, I've always been an entrepreneur, or at least an entrepreneurial spirit. And I started an organization, or I guess a company called One Pride Publishing, which really was just we developed local magazines. We started one in Hamilton. We had some success. Then we did one in Fairfield, had success there. And then we did one in Middletown. So we were pretty much running a full-fledged business from just producing magazines. As a part of that, we would do local stories on athletes and things of that nature. But, we weren't in sports. And I'd say once we had some success, we had some foundation beneath us, we had some capital to be able to put behind a company. I then decided, hey, let's go for this, because I felt like there was a void at least a little bit of a niche and a void in high school sports from a coverage standpoint, the way that we wanted to do it, which is probably not the traditional way that's always been done, but it's the way that I felt like we could find some success. We could find ways to, monetize it, to make it to where we could turn it into a full-time deal. And I'd say that happened. That decision was made, believe it or not, probably 2.5 years ago. We decided we were going to do it. And from there, it was about basically building the foundation for about 1.5 years. And then I think last July, we launched, announced that we were going to go and start covering sports. So that's kind of a good, I guess, timeline of the way things went down.
Take me through the process on building Chatterbox Sports.
I'd say building it was nothing more than just having a quick, a vision, and then trying to find a few good people that also could buy into that vision. And really it was myself, Sean Spurlock. And then really we brought on our first full-time guy, which was Reed Mouse. And he took a chance and left kind of like the Northwest Ohio area to come down. So I don't know. I guess from a building perspective, I don't ever really look at it like it was a huge monumental task personally. I think it was more of like, hey, let's get a quick foundational knowledge of what we want. I'm not a big planner. I don't think that it's a good idea to always spend all of your time trying to guess what you're going to do. I'm more of the mindset of, hey, let's go out and do it. And if it works, great, let's do it again. If it doesn't work, that's fine. We'll figure out something else that does work. And I think that's kind of how our first entire year went, was kind of like a whack-a-mole, if you will. We were just all over the place trying to figure out what we were going to do, what we were going to have success with. And I think ultimately that kind of led into finding out what we did well, and that was live streaming and some other things that we did pretty well.
How'd you get the name for Chatterbox Sports?
Good question. Truthfully, I think it was just a natural progression to get there. It was we wanted to kind of make the name relatively quick or relatively easy to remember. And there was an old bar, I will say, in Hamilton that its name was Chatterbox. I don't think it came from that, but it maybe subliminally came from that, I guess. I don't want to say that it didn't have any influence at all, but yeah, I just liked the sound of it, I guess. We all thought it sounded pretty clean and crisp to be able to say it easily, and it was relatively rememberable. I don't think there's anyone in this area that kind of has even any kind of business function named Chatterbox. So, yeah, we went with it. We didn't give it too much of thought. It certainly wasn't like the brain power of the Washington football team. That's for sure.
Thank goodness that's only a temporary name. I hope it's a temporary name. Please.
Yeah.
You mentioned a couple names. Who all helps out with Chatterbox?
We have a lot of people that help. I mean, we only have 3 full-time people right now. I expect that to move in the positive direction in the future here, as we get sports back, and we need them back. But realistically, like I said, myself, Sean, and Reed were kind of full-time guys. But then we've had guys that really, whether they're looking to kind of do this from a moonlight perspective, or if they're looking at it to do it to try to expedite their careers, or they look at us like kind of like a minor league place to come and be able to get their chance to go somewhere else. We've had, I'd say, up to 20 to 30 people that genuinely help us on a relatively consistent basis. A few of those guys that jumped on early: Justin Thomas, Nathaniel Hipsley, Jeff Kim. Those 3 names kind of stand out quickly. We've had some other folks like Alex Gray come on board and help us. And we're gonna take care of those guys if we make it. That's one thing that I care about deeply. Is we've had a lot of people that have been instrumental in our success and helped us. And we're trying to always add people and trying to find good talent, and not only that, but just people that care. I think that's the most important thing, is people that care about not only the job they do, but also the job they can do for the kids in the schools. So we're having some success. It's just a matter of if we can continue to grow on it, maybe we'll add more full-time people soon. But I'd say as far as how many people help us, it's a lot, man. 20 to 30 people that help us with the live streaming and everything else we do.
Did you ever think that you'd have that many people help out when you first started Chatterbox Sports?
No, I mean, I don't think so. If you had to ask me like point blank before we started, I don't think so. But I think it's the good thing about building something is that as you see that you need help, you basically can search for it and find it. And we've been lucky enough to find some good people. And I'm not that I have a secret recipe, but I feel like I found a good way of finding good talent and adding to it relatively quickly and easily. And a lot of it's just keeping an eye on who's in the realm of high school sports or in the realm of caring about high school sports and just reaching out from there. So I don't know. I envision Chatterbox growing. So I say at this point, nothing will surprise me.
I mean, I like that recipe. You look for good people that care about what they do, and then you care about the people that work for you. So I think that's definitely a great foundation to build upon.
Yeah, I think that's the only way to build a healthy culture is to give autonomy. One, let people do what they do. If they've proven they can have success before, then give them the chance to do that. And then from there, just giving them a good platform to do it on, right? I think that's my main focus is to give people that want to do the things they love to do, give them an incredible platform to do it on. I've always said, and this is taking nothing away from writers or talent, but, I've always said that a lot of the beat writers that you see that are famous, they're built based off the backbone and the platform that they write on. It's not that they have an unbelievable talent. Of course, every so often you'll have someone that does have an amazing talent. But I would argue, and I'm sure that some would say that I'm definitely wrong, and that's fine. That's their opinion. But if you're going to write for USA Today, right, as a columnist or whatever it may be, you're probably talented. But there's probably a guy in Toledo, Ohio, or somewhere in South Carolina or wherever else that's just as talented, but just doesn't have that platform. So, my goal is to give people a great platform to be able to have people see their talent and then expand upon it. And hopefully one day, instead of leaving us, we're doing so well to where we just keep and hire our own talent. And we'll see where that goes. But that's kind of the philosophy behind people coming and helping, and the philosophy behind, what I think why we've had success, people coming and staying with us. So
in terms of covering schools and sports, what services does Chatterbox Sports provide?
Chatterbox, I mean, most people obviously know who we are, what we do in our area. We do cover local high school sports for the vast majority of what we do. I've given the opportunity for a few guys to write about collegiate and pro things, but for the vast majority of what we do, it is basically live streaming high school sports, and then also maybe some photography that goes along with that. Bailey Osborne, the guy that I failed to mention earlier, but he's been an incredible guy to come on board with us as well, and he does a great job of getting still images. And ultimately, I think that live streaming is who we are and what we will do. I think this upcoming year, if we get a chance to do it, I think last year we kind of were the new kids on the block, and everybody's like, oh yeah, they seem to do a pretty good job. But this year, I think that it's a whole nother step. And it's a whole nother leap. I think it's a giant leap if we're able to take it, and we'll see. I don't want to jinx it, but I'm hopeful that we'll get sports to be able to prove it. So
I'm hoping so too. Now, what are some of the schools and the sports that you get to cover on the platform?
Platform-wise, schools are going to be. We've kind of decided to try to do partnerships this year, which is simply the idea of 700 WLW is a partner with the Reds, and that if the Reds are playing, there's a chance that you could probably turn on 700 WLW and listen to the game, right? It's an easy way to understand who's with who and what's with what, and you can kind of easily make the reference of, all right, this game's on, I can watch it on here. Similar, and I'm not a Notre Dame fan, but Notre Dame fans there for a long time. It's like, okay, the game's on, it's probably on NBC. And that's just because there's a natural relationship there. I think we're trying to do the same thing with schools. Those 11 schools are out of 3 different leagues. The SWAC is one. The SWAC, Southwest Ohio Conference, is going to be Harrison is a partner school, Edgewood's a partner school, Ross is a partner school, and Talawanda is a partner school. So those four schools we have out of the SWAC. Out of the GMC is probably our biggest league that we cover. It's going to be Hamilton, Middletown, Fairfield, Lakota East, Lakota West, and Oak Hills. So that's six to 10 teams there in that league. And then lastly, we are going to get ourselves in the GCL here at some point. And we started with Baden just because we're headquartered out of Hamilton, obviously. So it was an easy relationship there. But, the Fenwicks, the Alters, certainly the GCL South, I think at some point we'll make our way there. And hopefully we can get some relationships with just the leagues in general, instead of it being kind of like an a la carte school-based type thing. So we'll see how that goes. But those are the 11 schools that we will be covering this year pretty heavily.
Majority of those are in Butler County. I think Oak Hills is closer to Cincinnati than all those, but still big schools and great programs, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Just the transition from some of the schools in the SWAC to the GMC, and you hear about all the fireworks and trying to battle with the Coleraine Cardinals, and you got the Fairfield Indians, of course. Hamilton had a nice year last year too. I mean, that's a lot of great schools. That's a big scope.
It is a big scope. I think it's a big responsibility too, because I think as crazy as it may seem, some people question, you're out in the SWAC, it's a bunch of small schools. But I'm here to tell you that to be quite frank with you, the fan bases from those programs in the SWAC almost are just as big as the fan bases in some of the larger schools. And I'm not going to throw names out there, but I genuinely mean that. Your Harrisons, your Rosses, your Edgewoods, and I didn't really get a chance to be at Talawanda as much as I would have liked to last year, but they brought crowds and they care about their high school sports. So those leagues, or I guess those schools are all small in nature for sure. The maybe perhaps the product on the field isn't as high of a level as you would see in the GMC, but from a caring standpoint, fan base standpoint, they're 100% there. And then from our end, I grew up playing in the GMC. I watched a lot of GMC stuff when I grew up, because I was a fan of Hamilton, and so I'm relatively familiar with the talent that exists within your GCL South and your GMCs. That said, too, I lived up in Dayton for about 10 years, and I'm relatively obviously familiar with the GWalk. So I worked at Sinclair Community College, believe it or not, for 3 or 4 years, whatever that number may be in my head. But ultimately, I'm relatively familiar with that league, and I'm not forecasting the future, but trust me, there would be nothing more that I would love to do than to move my way right up the 75 corridor there to the GWalk. So yeah, that's kind of the scope and the idea of who we are and what we do and who we cover.
Well, as a fellow Daytonian, I'd say, when you come up, that'd be nice, and we welcome you aboard. Going back to the schools, though, I mean, small school, big school, it doesn't matter. They're still athletes. There's still a loyal fan base behind them, and it's still good sports. I mean, the Southwest Ohio Conference, that's stemming off from the ginormous Fort Ancient Valley Conference from days gone by, and that's pretty much, it was a bigger version of the GWalk. And can you believe the GWalk's down to, what is it now, 8 teams?
Yeah, it seems like they've kind of dwindled that league down there. At one point when I was up there living there, it seemed like half the state was a part of the GWalk. But I actually don't mind it. I don't know how you feel about it. I think that it's nice to have a league to where you have a lot of familiarity, and it doesn't seem like there's a bunch of different divisions and you're trying to figure out the whole situation of who's who and what side's what and all that. But you might feel differently.
I don't mind either. I mean, the 20 teams, that was pretty fun to watch, but the 8 teams now, it's easier to follow. You don't have American West, National North, or West, whatever it was. Right. So I don't mind that at all. I just find it interesting how much the GWalk has shifted. There's no more Fort Ancient Valley Conference anymore. It's split between the Southwest Ohio Conference and the Eastern Cincinnati Conference. Lebanon's now in the ECC now, away from the GWalk, and I think for me, I don't care what I'm covering, school-wise or sport-wise. I like seeing the changes of the conferences and seeing, how one improves and how one deals with the loss of a team. I mean, the SWAC just lost Little Miami back to the Eastern Cincinnati Conference as well.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, the SWAC is obviously fighting to try to keep schools. I mean, they're down to 6, so it's not like there's a significant amount of schools in that league either. And I'm sure they're trying to poach away people. I'm not saying that I know for sure, but I would just guess based off proximity and strength of talent within that school district would be Monroe. I would see a school like Monroe, them trying to get them on board. But we'll see what happens. Like you said before, the good news is it doesn't matter what league any of these schools play in. They still have the same fan bases. They still care just as much. And the talent level typically stays right around the same no matter what league someone plays in. But ultimately, yeah, I mean, it is wild. Things change pretty quickly in high school sports, or at least even in sports in general. I mean, you look back 20 years ago at college leagues, and they're a lot different than they are now too. So,
absolutely. I mean, Cincinnati down the AAC was part of the Big East. Now Xavier's in the Big East, and that's probably the craziest conference shift we've seen as of late.
Yep, no doubt. Well, even the Pac out west, they kind of shifted some things around, and the Big 12 shifted some things around with Nebraska leaving and going into the Big Ten, and Rutgers leaving and Maryland leaving the ACC. So I guess it's just one of those things where everybody gets bored after so many years and decides they want to try something different, I guess. I don't know.
Like I mentioned, you cover a great scope of schools and sports, but are there any sports or teams that you want to cover in the future for Chatterbox Sports?
Yeah, I mean, I just let the cat out of the bag, I guess, on that question a little soon. But GCL South's one that I think that we obviously should be a part of as long as we continue to do a good job and we get bigger. But I think the main focus for me is, and for us is to do a good job for where we're at now. Mm-hmm. But as soon as I feel like we got a good stranglehold on that, which hopefully will be soon, I fully expect us to try to make a plea up to the GWAC in that area. And I say GWAC, but maybe I should say Dayton. Your Alters, your Trotwood Madisons, and obviously all of your GWAC schools, whether it be Centerville, Miamisburg, Northmont. I know I'm going to forget a bunch, Kettering and so forth. All of those schools, Beaver Creek, Springboro, all of those schools, obviously we want to cover and do a good job of. So I think from there, we got to figure out on our end what our model looks like with that. Is it, do we try to find someone that literally will run that for us or with us? Do we continue to call it Chatterbox? That's something I've actually wrestled with a lot in my head. Is I do think high school sports is very regionalized. It's very local. Max Preps, no offense, but it's a shotgun approach, and it's obviously what it's them, and they got in at the very beginning of this. But honestly, who goes to Max Preps to read news articles or find content? Because no one really cares about high school sports outside of maybe a 40, 50 mile radius of where they live. Certainly they don't care across state lines. So I've thought about the idea of, instead of it being called Chatterbox Sports in Dayton, it's called something different, but we have the exact same model. We have the exact same platform, and we obviously intertwine with each other. But that way, when people go in Dayton to go somewhere specific, they're getting nothing but Dayton sports. So, but that's something I've wrestled with a lot. So I guess, I'm not 100% sure what I want to do with that yet, or what we're going to do with that yet. But I think Dayton's the next place we're going for sure.
And like I mentioned, us Daytonians, we'd welcome that, just because there are a lot of great sports up here, and Southwest Ohio, from Cincinnati, Dayton onwards, it's chock full of great action. No matter what you're looking for, no matter what school, there's always something good. The only thing I might say is I'll bring up my alma mater in Valley View. I think that'd be a terrific school to cover, just because, the football team, in the 90s, they were a pretty big
Germantown,
juggernaut.
right?
Yeah,
Germantown.
Farmersville,
Absolutely.
Germantown.
Germantown, baby. I'm very familiar with Valley View. I've been there a few times. When I worked at Sinclair, I would be out there at Valley View. Now, Valley View kind of had like a different type of. I should know this. Are they what kind of they're not the Devils, are they?
Nope, Spartans.
Spartans. All right.
The football teams had those Navy helmets since pretty much the beginning of Valley View, I'm sure. But
Yeah.
no, I mean, high school's out in the middle of nowhere. But yeah, great football program, Barker Field. I still can't believe it's turf now. That's still the weirdest thing for me, because when I went to school there, it was natural grass. Now it's turf. It's like, where did that come from?
Seems like everybody has gone to the old turf surface for many reasons, I know. But quick fun fact with Valley View, not that I want to bore your listeners, but I actually was at a breakfast one time at Valley View when you guys, and I say you guys as in Valley View, when you guys had your senior walk-in or whatever it may be, where you guys rode whatever the heck you wanted to ride in, and I was there for that lunch. That's one thing I do remember from Valley View.
I feel like when it was my senior year, there was a day where everyone brought in their tractors. Like, yep, that's us.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think Valley View would be nice, and that's good programs there. I mean, if you look at the Southwestern Buckeye League, you also got Middletown, Madison at the upper cusp of Butler County, Preble Shawnee's up there. I mean, where I'm from, Preble County, I mean, we like our sports, but there's one paper I know that covers it in Register Herald, and that's kind of it.
All right. Well, you're selling me. I hear you.
I mean, if you've never been to Eaton's football field, it's gorgeous. They did a nice job. Although it is sad historically, their Park Avenue field, that was really cool. I mean, good luck finding a parking spot down there, but natural grass field in the middle of the neighborhood, I mean, it was great. But yeah. I mean, for where I'm from, West Alexandria, we got Twin Valley South. That's a good field. I think one of the few natural grass fields you can find. Great great basketball program led by longtime head coach Tony Osberger. He retired, and now the court's named after him. He was there from the late '80s onwards until last year. Yeah, I can talk your ear off about where I'm from and everything.
Wealth of knowledge up there, and we'll call it the sticks, because that's just what I'm going to call it.
No, that's fine. That's what it is. But hey, I'm from Preble County, so you know,
sure.
I gotta spread my love for West Alex, because you know, most people in Dayton don't know where West Alexandria is. Like, where's that from? Are you in Indiana or something? Like, no, we're in Ohio.
That's right.
It's
like close to Indiana, to be fair.
Yeah, I mean, it's about 30, 45-minute drive to Richmond, but I mean, it's like, come on, we're in Ohio. I mean, we had, not like this is good, but Twin Valley South in the 2000s had a 35-game losing streak in football, and yeah. But anyway, well, I'm sorry, I'm getting
that's
way
okay.
ahead.
The 35-game losing streak sounds familiar in Hamilton. Although it wasn't 35, there was a lot of losing in Hamilton, and I think that's starting to change. So that's good. But
I mean,
I feel your pain.
I mean, last year it looked very promising for the Big Blue. I think the only way to go for Hamilton is up.
Sure. Well, when you're towards the bottom there for a while, there is only one way to go. That's up. And I think that last year was a good step in the right direction. And we'll see. What's funny when you start to cover sports, though, high school sports like we have, you know, of course, I'm from Hamilton. I went to Hamilton. Of course, you have a little bit of an interest within your alma mater. But, you know, I've grown to not only like and enjoy some of the other schools, but actually obviously root for them once it gets in the tournament. And, you know, and those are even rivals, you know, your Fairfields, if you will. Now I genuinely like to see them have success just because I know the people over there, and same with Middletown and things of that nature. Whereas before you know the people, right, it's easy to not like them and root against them. So yeah, covering high school sports has kind of changed my perspective on fandom. That's for sure.
You know, it's funny. It's like that Family Guy quote, boo, you are villains because you live in a different part of the state than I do, or something like that.
Yeah.
It's funny how that changes when you cover sports, because for me, I just want to see Southwest Ohio do well, and I want to see them battle hard in the state and pick up some state titles. That's that's what I do on my podcast. I cover them all and talk about a little bit of them, and I want to see Southwest Ohio do well. Nothing against the other parts of the state, but Southwest Ohio is my backyard. It's where I'm from, so that's
Right.
So let's
makes sense.
So let's get back to you and Chatterbox Sports. What's some of the most rewarding points of building this program up?
The most rewarding parts is just seeing your success, not only as a company, but just seeing it through I don't want to say the kids' eyes or really even maybe the community's eyes, but yeah, there's prideful moments that exist when you realize that if it wasn't for you, they either wouldn't have the ability to reflect back on those memories, or you wouldn't have created memories for them. Case in point, when we went and did the tournament last year, I think from a basketball perspective, we got the ability to live stream the regional semifinals just because of a weird situation with the coronavirus, and they eliminated fans but said that we could go. And I don't know how many other people were live streaming there, but we had roughly right around 15,000 people.
Wow.
That tuned into our platform over the two games. And to think that we launched in July, right? And to be sitting there in Cintas Center all alone by yourself, live streaming stuff with equipment that you barely could afford when you started. You kind of have to pinch yourself for there really quickly and realize, there's been a lot of hard work, but yeah, we got a little lucky here. And I think that was a really, really, really rewarding moment. Just simply because without us, what would have happened? Who watches that basketball game without Chatterbox Sports? Maybe they listen to it on the radio, but they're not watching the game. So I don't look at us as being like, we're God's gift to earth, because we're not. But I do think that sometimes it's like, hey, we kind of not only have owe it to ourselves to continue to try to do a great job, but I think we owe it to people that enjoy high school sports, because as we grow and as we get bigger, I feel like we can kind of become that ESPN-ish type place to turn to if you need to watch a game that you're not able to make. And hopefully our content on the back end of that will start to become great as well, to where we're not just a live streaming company, but people will turn to us for podcasts and articles and things of that nature as we grow. So yeah, I guess to answer your question, those are the prideful moments, I guess, if you will, when within our business.
You're giving a valuable service to the folks that can't be there, and because coronavirus pretty much put a boot on all the fans being able to watch. That's something to be proud of. And I since you guys were born, I've watched from afar, and I've been impressed, and I love seeing you guys grow like this. So you definitely got a fan up here in the Dayton, Ohio area.
That's right. Well, when we start to move that way, then we'll have to want to continue to work on that fandom of yours.
Sounds good. Now tell me some games or players that you fondly remember covering in your first year. And it doesn't have to be,
Sure.
Give me some names, give me some moments and games, and, give me your favorites.
I would say quickly in football, we did like a game day type show for the Fairfield Coleraine game that Blankenship actually brought up, who's the athletic director of Fairfield. He gave us that idea. He's like, hey, why don't you guys do your podcast thing that you do on Fridays on site at the game? And I said, that sounds like a great idea. Why don't we just try to make it like a game day type thing? So on Tuesday, we decided that we were going to do like a game day type thing on Friday, which is kind of wild. But that's a memory that I have. A cool moment was the Coleraine Fairfield game, two undefeated teams trying to win the league. Obviously, Colerane's won the league for the past 150 years or whatever it is. And Fairfield was trying to knock them off at their home place. Arguably, I would say they were the favorite. And then obviously Jaton McLean, big time running back going to Kentucky for Fairfield. He went down with an injury kind of on the second drive of the game. So that kind of was a little bit of a damper, but it ended up being a great game, went to overtime. And that was a memory that I have. I guess from a personal perspective, perhaps another football moment that I remember was perhaps two different games. One was an overtime game, Ross versus Baden, the very first game of the year, first game we ever covered, and it was a great football game. And then Hamilton ended up beating Sycamore, stopped them on 4th and goal, I believe, or somewhere right around the goal line, to pretty much clinch the playoff spot for them. So that's football. Basketball, I got a ton. I love basketball, like I said before. Well, I'd say a few moments for basketball was following East all year long, seeing the success they had. Unfortunately, as a Dayton guy, they barely scored away and got over Beaver Creek by a point to win the districts. But then the district day was probably one of the biggest moments, or one of the proudest moments of Chatterbox. We got to sit down there all day, cover all 4 games, and got to see East win a district championship, who we'd cover all year long. And then you turn that around and you get to see maybe arguably one of the craziest high school basketball games I've ever witnessed, between St. X and LaSalle. And LaSalle basically hit a half court shot at the end of the third period to kind of give them a little more momentum and cut the lead down to maybe a couple buckets. And then to turn around and hit another half court shot to tie the game to force overtime was just remarkable. And then obviously LaSalle ended up completing the comeback. So those are the moments that I remember throughout the high school season that were quite memorable. And I hope, like I said, we get to do it again.
I don't remember if I asked this question or not, but is there any other high school sport that you'd like to cover? You mentioned football, basketball. I'm not sure if you all get a chance with baseball, softball, but any other sport you'd like to try?
Yeah, I mean, we got the coronavirus shut us down for the spring. We had big plans to do some baseball, softball stuff. This year we're going to do a lot of things. I think we're going to cover pretty much every sport there is. And I think people will be impressed with what we have going on this year. Not to say that it's a secret, but we tentatively have plans right now to do 6 live streaming Friday night football games every Friday. So 6 broadcasts every Friday, and then from there, I want to say we're going to do right around 250 broadcasts for the 3 seasons.
Wow.
So that gives you a little bit of an idea. It's a lot. So we're pretty much covering a lot of sports, and with our partner schools, we pretty much are doing all their home football games, a decent amount of their home basketball games, and then from there we're also covering a few Olympic sports, as I'd call them. So maybe it'd be girls soccer a few games, boys soccer a few games, volleyball a few games, tennis maybe once, but I think it's going to be a pretty well-rounded operation this year.
Definitely love the Olympic sports. I love soccer and I love volleyball. I know it's a big operation, but if you ever get a chance, give Talawanda's hockey team a try. Just because, it's my favorite sport to call, although really, how many sports do I not like to call? Oh, yeah, I like to call all of them. But great team, and their coaching staff is all Talawanda grads, so yeah, they have probably one of the best hockey teams in Southwest Ohio. So, and also you get to go where the Miami Redhawks play too. That's their home for hockey. So, you can't beat that.
Yeah, I'll have to give West Cole a call about that. I did not. I wasn't aware.
Oh yeah, so. Their hockey team is really good, and like I mentioned, you get to be in the home of Redhawks hockey. So. Especially when they call the game, or not call the game, excuse me, when they play the games on the main rink, that's awesome. I mean, their side rink, their aux rink is good too, but it's,
right.
When you're in this,
like the big stage.
Yeah, like that. And I think Coach Sens told me, the hockey coach for Talawanda, that they were undefeated on the aux rink. So,
really?
Yeah, I think so. I always asked him, hey, are we playing on the main rink today? No. It's like, oh, I want to call the games on the main rink, but no, Yeah, I'd say it's the only hockey team in Butler County, high school hockey team. I mean, so
Yep.
yeah, if you can, give them a look, see, and yeah, tell Coach Sens I say hi.
I will do it.
So, how has this coronavirus affected you and Chatterbox Sports?
I mean, it's similar to the way it's probably affected everybody. I think that when you have a company name called Chatterbox Sports and then there's no sports, what do? I think we just hope and pray that we get fall sports, and at this point we'll take whatever we can get. But it's put us in a bind in regards to advertising. Yeah, it's put us in a bind in regards to scheduling. Right now, I just need a decision out of DeWine and the OHSAA. I know it's really not even the OHSAA at this point. It's pretty much just DeWine. Mm-hmm. Need a decision out of the governor's office of what exactly we're going to do for the fall, because there's a lot of planning that goes into what we do, and quite frankly, I don't have the ability just to, within 1 week or 2 weeks, just decide to be able to roll the carpet out there and say, hey, let's go do this. Hopefully I get a few weeks to be able to know what's going on. And if they're going to play football in the fall, then I think it's safe to say that nothing is going to change outside of what we already have had so far for the past, 4 weeks. Mm-hmm. So if you still deem it too dangerous to play football with the statistics that we currently have, then I think it's time to start talking about alternatives. But if we deem it as unsafe right now, then let's go out and just say it. But if we think that it's safe currently, then I think it's safe to say that, hey, let's roll the balls out there and let's play. So obviously that's not my decision to be made, it's theirs, but I'm hopeful we can get a verdict one way or the other soon.
That leads me to my next question. Do you see sports returning this fall?
Tough question, but if you had to really put me up against the wall, I don't see football happening. I don't see. I don't. I say that as I don't want to put bad mojo out there. Personally, I think they can do it. I personally think they can do it. I think that with schools going back in, I don't think the dangers of playing football are going to be that significant versus not playing them. I think that there's some mental health that goes along with all of this as well, for high school kids that I don't think people talk about enough. So I personally am on the side of playing. Obviously, I know that people say, "Oh, you're biased because you have a company that might benefit from them playing," but I just don't see from the data anything that suggests that it's a severe worry to play. But just the way things have gone, I don't know why. I can't really tell you why exactly I feel the way I feel, but I just don't. I don't think there's going to be great news coming out. And I think that one thing I do want to get out of here is in saying before they announce it for sure is that the idea of these high school football coaches wanting to try to flip the seasons, I think is one of the most absurd ideas I've heard in regards to getting the other sports to flip. If you want to put football in the spring, I'm all for that. I actually don't mind that at all. I think it's a good idea, but I also think baseball should go off in the spring. I think softball should go off in the spring. I think all the other sports should go off in the spring, and you'll just have to work with the multi-sports athletes. You have all these coaches that preach, "Oh, we want multi-sports athletes," which I agree with. But if that's the case, then you know what? For 1 year, you got to make an exception for kids and just say, all right, they're not going to be at every practice. They don't have to be at every practice. And, if it's a multi-sport athlete that plays football and baseball, then perhaps they're at the baseball games when they're at the baseball games, and that's up to the kid. If they want to go out and try to do both in the same season, they're allowed. If not, they have to pick and choose. That's okay too. But I don't think you can just come in as a football coach and say, hey, we're going to move baseball to the fall when we don't really know what's going to happen in the fall. I mean, it might get really bad again, and then all of a sudden you got to cancel everything. You can't cancel baseball and softball 2 times in a row because you flipped it to try to say football that hasn't gotten canceled once. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I'm at with it. I'm hopeful that it doesn't come to be that way, but put me up against it, I'm going to say football is not going to be played in the fall.
I think, pushing fall sports to spring for yours truly, I announce college soccer for UD and Wright State, and pushing that to spring where I also have baseball, well, I used to have softball at Wright State, but baseball at Wright State and Dayton, I mean, that's, I don't, I don't know if I want to know what my spring will look like with all
Sure.
those sports. And I think just doing that to high school, that puts a conundrum where, like you mentioned, what sport is the multi-sport athlete going to play, and is it going to be a plausible thing or something that can be done just because
Right.
you have so many sports. You push soccer, volleyball, girls tennis to the spring. Now along with that you got golf, which is also a fall sport, I believe, and then you got football in there. You
Right.
got baseball, softball, track. Just
Yeah.
having that much sports, that's tough.
It's a lot. I'm not saying it's not a lot, but I think it's doable, and I think that you can get away with just holding. I think soccer personally should be played in the fall this year. Uh, you know, that's my personal opinion would be you run with fall sports outside of football, and the elephant in the room is, and maybe is that football has to be played for the financial standpoint, most likely. And I not to demean all the other sports, because obviously I didn't play football, so I'm not really even a big football person. I mean, the reality is that a lot of athletic budgets run off of football, and it's kind of one of those deals where if dad doesn't go to work, then you're not going to get all these other bells and whistles that you might want. So
Yeah.
you gotta kind of let dad go to work in order to get all this other stuff that you want. And football is the kind of going to work in my analogy here. So if you have to move football to the spring, and that's it, then I say you do it. And I say for 1 year, you just tell the kids that they're able to miss practice if they want to play both sports. Most kids that play football don't play baseball. I mean, there might be a few kids. I know track is going to be affected, but you know what? Hey, I know I don't want to sound pessimistic here, but listen, if you have to sacrifice a track season in order to save football, it's kind of one of those things where you probably just have to do something like that just for a year, just to make sure that you can save an athletic budget. But people don't really want to talk about money inside of high school sports because it's kind of like this, sanctuary type thing where you don't really want to get into that. But hey, I think that is a realistic thing you have to talk about. You can't suggest that high school sports would survive without football. So we'll see what happens, man. I'm hopeful none of that even occurs, but I have a hard time seeing football being played in the fall.
Big thing is I mean, yes, those are kids, but it's a business, and football is the big sport that brings in the most bucks. So yeah, I totally understand that.
It just supports the other programs. I'm not saying that the schools are making a bunch of money and they're millionaires from it. That's not what I'm getting at. But when the I've even used baseball because obviously baseball guy. I mean, when the baseball team's traveling on buses throughout the entire season and going here and there, and you're paying umpires and you're doing all those things, like most likely football's paying for those bus trips. I mean, people won't think about that, but that's the facts. So,
Trace, let's get into some of the happier sides of sports. What's some of your favorite things about sports around Hamilton and locally in Southwest Ohio?
I think sports in general just provide an avenue of entertainment, to be honest. And I think from the standpoint around here locally, I think for the most part, the only sports I watch are the Reds and obviously I watch the NFL a little bit, but hey, the vast majority of what I do is my business in Chatterbox. So if it's on Chatterbox, then I'm watching or I'm paying attention to it. And if it's not, there's a good chance I'm not. So, so I guess just to answer your question quickly and easily, the things around Southwest Ohio that are going on are really just the waiting game of can somebody knock off Cole Rain in the GMC, and then from there we'll Bolden make another step forward at West. There's a question that I have in my mind. I guess the other thing would just be will there be any new emergers in high school basketball around here that are going to challenge Moeller Those are the types of things that obviously come to my mind when it comes to sports out down here.
Fairfield had that great shot, too. I mean, if we do have a season, I'd like to see Coleraine Fairfield round 2. But I'm interested in seeing how Winton Woods, A, does in the Eastern Cincinnati Conference since being an independent for all those years, and
Sure.
B, if that helps or hurts them trying to get in the playoffs, because at least they have a conference schedule, and they could probably fill 10 games like so.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't think Winton Woods is going to have too big of an issue. We'll see what happens, but last year it was quite amazing that they didn't make the playoffs, obviously for scheduling reasons, but did make the playoffs when arguably they would have won the state championship. But that's just how it goes, I guess.
That's the way the points crunch up. So,
yeah.
Hey. Now let me ask you, what would you like to see in the future for sports and media around the area?
I mean, really, I'd like to see. I don't really put much thought into it as a landscape whole. I mean, I look at it literally everything just from our side of things with Chatterbox. I hope we get to where we have an official partnership with the OHSA at some point to allow us to get to where we can start doing some postseason games that perhaps aren't later in the tournament to where your spectrums would be there.
Mm-hmm.
But I just hope it continues to go more. It continues to get covered more because honestly, traditional legacy media has kind of decided they don't know how to monetize local high school sports. Therefore, that's why you kind of don't see high school sports being covered maybe the way you used to. It's simply because the traditional media does not know how to monetize it, or they don't want to monetize it, or perhaps they don't think that it's worth investing in. So, for us, I guess, is we don't rely on the traditional media approach, and we're hopeful that the way that we're going to do things will make it not only where it makes sense, and it's something where we love to do it, but also where we're able to monetize it, and the viewers and the high school sports fans will have a place to be able to find what they want, and that's through the things that we plan to do. So we'll see. It's all a guessing game at this point.
Now, Chatterbox Sports has live streams, but also a lot of articles published, so this is a two-sided question. For those that want to become a broadcaster or a sports writer, what advice can you share?
Do it. That's my advice. Do it. I don't think you need a platform anymore in order to be able to do things. I think some people think they got to wait until they get a job. They got to wait until they're going to get their big break or their opportunity. Very much like yourself, you go out and do it. There's platforms out there that allow you to do things that you never would have had the chance to before, whether it be YouTube, whether it be, doing podcasts and having places like Spotify and Apple podcasts to be able to put your stuff out on. Social media has been a big influence in regards to being able to get your content out there and having people see what you do. You don't really have to be told by someone else that you're good enough to do something anymore. You can kind of do it yourself. And that's kind of the beauty with what we've done, and the beauty with really, with anybody that's aspiring to do something, go out and do it. I'm not saying we're the only place to do it, but if someone wants to try their hand at broadcasting and wants a platform to where there's thousands of people that are going to be listening, then there's a good chance we have somewhere to where you can have an opportunity to do that. And if you do a good job and you can get better, then your role will get bigger and better. And whether or not we get big enough to offer full-time jobs, or maybe there's someone else that has an opening that's obviously heard you on our platforms, then there's an opportunity that you can go there when that opportunity arises. So I think it's just a matter of doing it. So don't sit back and wait for a chance or say, oh, no one ever really told me, I didn't get the job or whatever it is. Just create the job, create your success is what I would say to that.
And you're absolutely right. There's so many platforms. I mean, who'd have thought that when YouTube launched that, hey, we're going to stream sports on this one day. I mean, that's what I do for hockey seasons. Like, I'm still baffled by the fact that we're streaming on YouTube, which is normally just a place where videos where cats are playing the piano. Now I'm streaming sports on it. So, yeah, there's definitely a platform for everything. Social media definitely helps spread the word, that type of thing. And, for broadcasters too. I mean, it's easier to keep a hold of a demo and update it, just
Exactly.
because everything's digital and you don't have to worry about sending disc or anything like that. It's, if you have your own website, you have a home for all your platforms and everything.
100%. You got it.
If people out there want to work for Chatterbox Sports, how do they get a hold of you or someone that helps hire?
Just DM us, or you can send us an email. DM us on Twitter at Cbox Sports, CBOX Sports, or you can always email just the general inbox that we check, which is contact@chatterboxsports.com. I think for the most part, we also search for talent, as you probably know. We send DMs out to people. We're looking for people as well. So we're always trying to find people that are interested in high school sports or have a passion for it, because we feel like our platform will continue to grow, and we have an entrepreneurial spirit within our company, which is, when you come on, you're not going to get bossed around. You're not going to get told what to do, and you're going to allow. There's a lot of freedom and a lot of flexibility with using our platform. So yeah, it's just a matter of, if you have an interest, just reach out to us and say hi to us at a game. If we're at a game, whatever it is, there's a good chance that if you reach out, we're going to give you an opportunity, or at least we'll listen to what you have to say.
Trace, thank you so much for your time today, and happy first birthday to Chatterbox Sports. Looking forward to seeing what you all do in the future.
All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on, and best of luck to you. And I know that I'm sure that we'll see each other again at some point here in the near future with either crossing paths or doing things together, and whatever it may be. But like I said, I appreciate you thinking of me and reaching out.
Not a problem, Trace. Again, thanks for your time, and that will do it for episode 173 of the Cincinnati Dayton Sports Podcast. We'll talk to you again for episode 174. For listening to another episode of the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast with Lee W. Mowen. To subscribe to this podcast, please visit theleewmowen.com, spelled TheLeewmowen.com, then click on Podcast. From there, you can find your favorite way to catch new episodes of this podcast, such as on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, TuneIn, the iHeartRadio app, Pandora, and many more platforms. Follow along on social media by liking the Facebook page, the Cincinnati and Dayton Sports Podcast, and follow along on Twitter at CindayPod and the Lee W. Mowen. Feel free to send in future questions for Mowen's Mailbag on Twitter or Facebook. The closing theme was created with the Splash app, available for free on Google Play and the App Store. This is Lee W. Mowen signing off. Let's talk local Cincinnati and Dayton sports again on the next episode.